Hi, all. Hey, my name is Meredith, and I'm currently a counseling student at Regent University. I'm actually graduating very soon, which is exciting. I'm graduating in a week, so yay. I currently work as an intern at counseling services at Virginia Wesleyan University, so it's been a really fun year working with the university and with students on campus. And of course, thank you all so much for having me. I'm really sad that we couldn't meet at the beginning of April. Obviously, with all of the restrictions and just the COVID virus going around, it was a total shift for all of us, right? And it has been a difficult and stressful time, I know, for everyone. So what we talk about in this video and in this presentation, you can even use and take back with you at your homes when you're with your family, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious. So I definitely want you to be aware of maybe your thoughts that you're having at home, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed or scared. Pay attention to those thoughts as we look into cognitive behavioral therapy. So I'm going to look into or I'm going to discuss things and counteracting thoughts or negative thoughts or beliefs that I would use in a normal session with a client with cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT. And I am not trained in CBT. I don't have that specific training for it, but I do practice it, and I am a CBT informed therapist. And during this time, I will, or during the presentation, I will go back and forth sharing my screen, especially my presentation with you all. And we're also going to be watching a video and be looking at a few other things as well. So one moment while I share my slideshow with you. Okay. And I'm going to share it from the beginning here. And we're going to start with a brief history of cognitive behavioral therapy. So obviously we have Ivan Pavlov, who studied and did research with classical conditioning. You probably remember the dog and salivation experiment with food when the bell was rung. We have B.F. Skinner, who specifically worked with and studied positive and negative reinforcers. We have Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, and they're more of the modern cognitive therapists, and most of what we use today comes from their work. So we have Albert Ellis, and he created this rational emotive behavioral therapy, and where you look at the irrational thinking, that's his terminology, irrational thoughts, irrational thinking, and he would challenge those thoughts in therapy, or any irrational thoughts individuals would have. We also have Aaron Beck, and he did cognitive therapy as well. And it's interesting, sometimes with different therapies, they may be similar in some ways, but they will be different in some ways as well. Notice Albert Ellis mentions irrational thinking. Aaron Beck is using automatic thoughts as that different terminology there. And he will often use negative automatic thoughts, right? So it's a little softer to digest, that irrational thinking versus, oh, these are just automatic thoughts you have, negative automatic thoughts. And Aaron Beck also looks at core beliefs as well. And most of what we're going to discuss today will reflect Albert Ellis's research and methods as well as Aaron Beck's. So I wanted to start off with just discussing the power of our thoughts and our thinking. And here's a quote from a cognitive behavioral therapy book. It's called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple. And there's a picture of it on a future slide, but this is a quote from it that I thought was interesting. So for something that can't be seen, heard, or measured, thoughts have incredible power. Our mood for an entire day can hinge on how we interpret a single disappointment. Thoughts can also have a profound effect on our behavior, affecting whether we forgive or retaliate, engage or withdraw, persevere or give up. No matter what you've been struggling with, chances are that your thoughts have played a role, either in causing your distress or prolonging it. So I don't know about you guys, but I can definitely see how thoughts have influenced my life and even my day. In the morning, I notice it's really important for me to have my thoughts on something positive with the day. Even starting the day out with exercise or going outside can really orient my thoughts just well for the day. Okay, so identifying problematic thinking, and this is the book that I was just talking about. So kind of identifying, and you could be thinking for yourself or with others around you, but let's kind of, just think about yourself in this. Some ways you can identify problematic thinking is if there's a sudden shift towards negative emotion. Okay, you have a sudden shift and you're just feeling negative all of a sudden. Also, not being able to just shake a negative feeling. Maybe there's some rumination over the thought or over the feeling. And also struggling to meet your goals. If there's maybe some procrastination or you don't want to do something and there's just a block or something's inhibiting you from reaching your goals. And I actually got this information from the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple book. Okay, so starting off, we're going to look at some cognitive distortions, and this is specifically within Beck's model of therapy. There's a list of cognitive distortions, but with this video, we're actually going to look at around 5. And as you're watching this, I'm sure that some of these cognitive distortions will ring a bell to you. So I am going to pull up that video right now. One moment, please. I'm going to share the screen with you all again. Okay. And this video is on Therapist Aid, or the Therapist Aid website, excuse me. I actually use this website a lot for resources. There's topics, anger, anxiety, art, CBT, and CBT is exactly where I found this video, and I think you all will find it interesting.
When I was in school, I hated giving presentations. They were just the worst type of assignment, in my opinion. I'd stumble over my words, forget what I wanted to say, and they just always felt like they went really poorly. But then I'd get pretty good grades. And I didn't ever understand how that was happening. How would I feel like I did so poorly, but then I'd get good grades? Well, eventually I learned this is caused by something called cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is a type of irrational thought where you see things as a bit more negative than they really are. Now, cognitive distortions are completely normal. Everyone has them. It's just part of being human. But when they're too frequent or too intense, they can contribute to problems like depression and anxiety. So today, I want to tell you about 5 different types of cognitive distortions. The first cognitive distortion is called emotional reasoning. This is when you feel something so intensely that you start to think it must be true. For example, think of someone who has a fear of flying. They know the facts that flying is safer than driving. When they take that first step onto a plane, the fear takes over and they start to think, oh, I know this plane is going to crash. I know it's going to crash. Of course, the feeling doesn't have any bearing on the facts. But if you feel it strongly enough, it'll start to seem true. The next cognitive distortion is called disqualifying the positive. This is when you look at a situation with both good and bad aspects, but you sort of push that good stuff aside and you just focus on the bad stuff. So imagine you get a performance review at work. It says, great job, great job, great job, needs improvement, great job. You look at that and all you see is needs improvement. You forget about all the positive feedback. Another good example, imagine you go on a first date, everything is going well, you're getting along, you have a lot in common, and then you say something really stupid, you just put your foot in your mouth, and you wish you could unsay it. Well, when you get home that night, that's all you can focus on, that stupid thing that you said, and you sort of forget that you're getting along great and having fun. That's disqualifying the positive, when you only focus on a small negative aspect of some situation. The next cognitive distortion is called mind reading. This is when you make assumptions about other people's thoughts or their intentions or behaviors without really having enough evidence. So imagine you give a friend a call, they don't answer, and you start thinking, oh, I bet they had picked up the phone, saw it was me, put it back down. Or I bet they're hanging out with someone else they like more, or maybe they just don't like me. And that's mind reading. When you make assumptions about why someone does something or what they're thinking or feeling without really knowing. The next cognitive distortion is called all or nothing thinking. This is when you see things in extremes, nothing in between. They're either black or they're white. They're good or they're bad. On a more personal level, this might mean I'm beautiful or I'm hideous. I'm brilliant or I'm a moron. I've got a great job or I've got a terrible job. So for example, think of someone who seems to have a pretty good life. They've got a good job, close friends, hobbies they like, they're healthy, but their romantic relationship is sort of on the rocks. Now, most people might look at this life and think like, oh, that's great. They've got a good thing going. But they look at their own life and they think, my life's a mess. I'm such a loser, all because of that one thing. That's all or nothing thinking. When you reduce something to its extremes, just seeing the black or the white without seeing that gray in the middle. The final cognitive distortion I want to talk about today is called catastrophizing. This is when you only consider the worst possible explanations for something rather than the more likely explanations. For example, imagine you're waiting for a family member to get home from work, they're 15 minutes late, and you start thinking, oh, they must have been in a car accident. Why else would they be late? When in reality, just stuck at work for 15 minutes or stuck in traffic. And that's catastrophizing. You jump to the most drastic explanations without considering what's more likely. Now that I look back at my own experience giving presentations, I can see how cognitive distortions played a role. My presentations, they weren't perfect. I'd stumble over my words and forget a few things, but it wasn't a big deal. In a 20-minute presentation, it might have been 2 or 3 minutes that were a little choppy. Now, the good thing about cognitive distortions is once you learn to spot them, you can start to challenge them. And by doing this, you can change how you think and you can change how you feel. And in the long run, this will improve your mental health.
Okay. So if any of you are like me, there were probably some cognitive distortions that stuck out to you. I know some for me involve mind reading. I struggle with that. Catastrophizing, definitely have done that. Still struggle with those types of thoughts, right? So obviously cognitive behavioral therapy would be very helpful for me and in my thinking and my thoughts and my perception. And actually, I prefer going to a counselor who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy because that I know that type of counseling and therapy does help me and is helpful for me, especially with my thinking. Okay. And it looks like my slideshow, we're having looks stuck. So I'm going to, there we go. Okay. I'm going to make sure this is presenting correctly to you all. And thank you for your all's patience as I'm trying to figure out technology. This is my first instructional video that I have made. So this is new for me. So thank you all for being an audience for this. So after talking about those cognitions that we watched in the video, so we're going to look at an ABC model, which you probably heard of. And this is a way to track our thoughts. This is a way to track your thoughts. So usually you'll have an activating event, something that happens. And then whatever happens, there's thoughts that occur from that, right? And then from those beliefs or thoughts, you have feelings, right? You may start feeling something. You'll have a behavior often that comes along with it. So this would be our ABC. So A is our activating event. B are our beliefs and our thoughts about the situation or about what's going on. C is the consequence, and C would be our feelings, the behavior. So, and I'll get to D in just a second. So for an example, say you get a lower grade on a test that you would normally expect. So you got a C or a D on your exam. So that's an activating event. Think about what would be some beliefs or thoughts about getting a C or a D on an exam that you wanted to do well on? So a thought that I would have would be, or a belief, it's like, I'm a failure, right? I did a bad job. Can I do this course? Right? There's these beliefs and thoughts. And maybe with those thoughts, I'll have feelings such as I feel disappointed, I feel depressed. Um, so those are some feelings. I feel sad, I'll feel angry. So those are some feelings. A behavior might be maybe going and getting a carton of ice cream. I don't know. And just like, drowning out my sorrows for my C or D with ice cream, right? Or maybe you'll be disappointed and not really want to study for your next test, right? It's like, okay, if I can't do this, then I'm just not going to study for the next one because there's behavior there. So that's a negative way of thinking about it. And I've had to fight those thoughts before, guys. I've gotten those C's and D's on tests, and it was disappointing. But you know what? On later tests, there was another opportunity, right? Another opportunity for grade change. So this is where our D comes in. And so D is disputing those thoughts, right? So here's another way of looking at that. So you have an activating event. And what if the beliefs and thoughts are instead, okay, well, I got a C or D, I'm disappointed. That's a normal feeling. Like, I feel disappointed. I want to do better on the next exam. So accepting kind of that grade, taking it for what it is, still feeling disappointed about it. So those would be my feelings. And then with a behavior, maybe I would go and talk to my professor about it, trying to see if I can do better on the next exam. What can I do better? How can I study differently to get a better grade? Maybe another behavior would be me studying differently for the exam or studying more for this next exam coming up. So just want to explain that with the activating event, the belief, the consequences, and then disputing that, right? Having a change in thoughts or beliefs. Okay, so here's a great quote by Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Okay, I think that's a great quote for our CBT therapy. So with the disputing of the thoughts, like, how do we do that? What do we ask ourselves? And often a therapist can be helpful in even helping you dispute things, dispute thoughts. But here's some questions you can ask yourself. So what's the evidence for my thought? Okay, so almost like a pro-con. What's the evidence for my thought? What's the evidence against my thought? Literally taking a piece of paper and writing it out. Okay, here's the evidence for my thought. Here's the evidence against my thought, okay? Then, are there any errors in my thinking? So looking at those pro cons, are there any errors in my thinking? And even writing that, okay, there could be an error here. What is a more accurate way to look at the situation? So after you've taken a step back, looked at the pros and cons, right? Asking yourself, are there errors in my thinking? Ask yourself, what's a more accurate way of looking at the situation once you've taken a step back, right? And then after that, what are the effects of looking at the situation differently? So how are you feeling? Do you feel like you have more of an understanding? Are you feeling more content? Are you feeling hopeful? So there's some questions that you can ask yourself in disputing those previous thoughts. Okay, so now we're going to look at core beliefs, and the disputing of core beliefs is going to be similar. So I am going to share that screen with you as well. Just a second. Okay, so this is a worksheet that I will often pull up with my clients. I think it's really helpful in just looking at those core beliefs that are there. Obviously, we just talked about beliefs and thoughts. So these core beliefs can go at a deeper level. Of course, we have thoughts, and I think it's good to dispute those. But what are our core beliefs? So everyone looks at the world differently. Two people can have the same experience, but have very different interpretations of what happened. Core beliefs are the deeply held beliefs that influence how we interpret our experiences. So here we can think of our core beliefs like a pair of sunglasses. Everyone has a different shade that causes them to see things differently. And here's an example. So take a situation. So you're meeting a new person and thinking about asking them to go out for coffee. This can be a friendship. This can be a date. However you want to think about this. You can even think, oh, this person's cool. I'd love to get to know them more. It's like, oh, I'd like to get to know them more to go out on a date or something like that, just to get to know someone. So there's the situation. You meet a new person, okay, and you're like, okay, I'm going to ask them out for coffee. I'm going to think about it. Then you look at your core beliefs. So that arrow, that first one, the green shades, the core belief there is for that person would be, I am not worthy. Okay. So there's the core belief there. I am not worthy. The purple shades are, I am worthy. With both of those core beliefs, there is a consequence, and they're both different. Okay. So for the I am worthy core belief, you have the consequences of a thought. Okay, why would they ever go out with me if I believe I'm not worthy, right? Why would they go out with me? And so their behavior is they don't ask the person to go out for coffee, okay? There's that negative core belief. And so we look at the other shades and it says, I am worthy. So someone with that core belief, let's look at the thought and behaviors there. The thought is we might have fun if we go out together. Right, that's great. The behavior is they ask the person out to coffee. So I just want to show you the differences between those differing core beliefs and how that leads to different thoughts and different behaviors, right? And then we won't go over the rest of this because we don't need to, but here's several common core beliefs that people have or that they struggle with often. And then we'll talk about disputing those core beliefs. Okay, and we will go back to our slideshow. Okay. And again, thank you all for your patience while I'm figuring this stuff out. And so with the disputing the core beliefs, it's going to be very similar to what we've already discussed. And I don't know why it's not going to the normal slideshow. I'm going to try it one more time and we'll just go from the current slide if it won't do it. Okay, there we go. So, core beliefs. So asking yourself, what is the evidence of the core belief? Okay, what's the evidence there? Is it real? Is it not? So what's the evidence that contradicts your core belief? I've been making a list. Can you name 2 or 3 things that contradict your core belief? Right? So looking at the pro and con again, what is the evidence supporting the belief? What is the evidence that contradicts the belief? Then asking yourself, is it accurate? Is this core belief accurate for me? A good way to even ask yourself or kind of see what alternatives could be there is thinking, okay, how would my best friend react to me in this situation? What would they tell me, right? Just to kind of take a step back and step in, right? Or even how would you tell your best friend? How would you respond to your best friend if they were coming to you, even with an issue? But think about what would your best friend say to you? Then also, what is an alternative belief? So it's seeing and changing your belief. Like what would be an alternative belief to this core belief? And so an example that I often use with my clients is sword fighting. And that's kind of like disputing. It's like, okay, there's this core belief, it could be a negative core belief. Okay, your sword, you bring your sword out of, I don't know what you call that you keep your swords in. I have no clue. I don't know the words or terminology for fighting and things. But you take your sword out. And so you're sword fighting kind of like with your thoughts. It's like, okay, is this true? Is it not? What could dispute it? And it takes energy. I think something that you can take away from this, it takes energy to pull your sword out and to swing your sword. It's easy to be in those negative core belief patterns or certain negative thought patterns because we're used to it. It's reinforced over time, sometimes those thought patterns that we have. So when we're contradicting those thoughts that we normally have, it can be kind of difficult because you already have a neural pathway for certain thoughts and certain beliefs. That neural pathway is already there. And so it's easier to think and go in that direction. But it does take work and effort to create those new beliefs and just new thoughts. So disputing, it's easy to just dispute thoughts. Oh, okay, here's this reason. But it takes time and it takes energy and it takes muscle memory. So say you're learning to sword fight and you're fighting from above, right? And that's a new move for you. It's like, okay, I'm going to block this swing of the sword from above, or I guess it would be like that. So blocking from above, you would have to practice that block several times for you to get muscle memory. So that would be like your brain creating a new neural pathway, right? As you're disputing those core beliefs or disputing those thoughts that you have. So it's like sword fighting, and it takes time and sometimes it takes energy, but it is well worth the time and energy when it is practiced. So that's all I have for you all. So yeah, just think about, I know this has been a really difficult time with the COVID restrictions and things going on in the world. And I just want to encourage you all to think about your thoughts. What are you thinking? I know CBT is very helpful with treating anxiety. So with patients who have those types of concerns, I will often use cognitive behavioral therapy. And during this time of COVID, it's easy to feel anxious. You're like, what's going to happen? Maybe your family member lost a job. Maybe you lost a job. You're back at home with your family. How is that different? What are your stresses? And so it's easy to have anxious thoughts or even depressed thoughts during this time. I just want to encourage you all to think about what you're thinking about. Challenge it. Test it. Challenge it and test it. And I will leave that with you all to take away. And again, thank you all so much for having me in your class, even through Zoom, through this video. I'm recording it on Zoom. So thank you, Zoom. And thank you again so much for inviting me, and have a good rest of your semester and year as much as you can in this time. Take some time for yourself. Be creative in taking care of yourself, whether that's going outside and exercising, creating new ways to do things. So thank you again. Bye.